So good morning and welcome to Playtime by Fawns. My name is Graham Scott. I'm the sales director at Playtime by Fawns. Today I'm lucky to be joined by Marta de Ros Collado. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Marta's a clinical psychologist and she works with children and families across the UK. Thank you very much for joining us, Marta, today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I just wanted to try and get a bit of an understanding. So at Fawns, we work with schools across England and Wales to help children develop kind of social and physical health. And our key kind of philosophy is to help them lead healthy, active lives. I just wanted to get an understanding from you with the lockdown of how children will be feeling during this period. Could you give us a little bit of an insight into what they'll be going through?
Yeah, so I think all children are going through different things. It's really hard to generalize, especially for primary school children. But some of the things that most families will have noticed, I think, will be feelings of anxiety and how they show up. And the way that they show up in children is very different from adults. So I can talk a little bit about that if you're interested.
Yeah.
I think families and parents might also notice some like behavioral outbursts. And change is one of the things that children will have faced the most through lockdown. Like their entire world has changed and their day-to-day life has changed, obviously for us as well. But for them, routine, especially for primary school kids and up to the age of 9, really, routine is really key. Like it gives them safety and structure, and predictability is a really important thing. So that's all kind of changed. And now we're in a different place in lockdown because we've been like this for nearly 6 weeks. So yeah. Children may have just adjusted to it by now. So actually what parents might see is this week particularly and last week, they might have noticed lack of motivation with schoolwork and just feeling a bit withdrawn, not really wanting to do anything, starting to express a little bit more boredom. So I think the big emotional outbursts and the anxiety, all of that will have shown up in the earlier couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, the first period.
Yeah, that was one of the things that kind of noticed as a parent myself, as the children obviously, that anxiety, that change of routine was noticeable, and there was almost a bereavement period where they kind of lost that routine and obviously socialising with friends.
And I think it's really confusing for children. Coronavirus is really confusing. And had we had this conversation maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe I'd be talking about how you talk about coronavirus. I kind of hope that families have now spoken to their kids about it. But I think for some children, it might still be really confusing, especially the younger ones. So up to the age of 7, because of their children's brain development, they won't really understand what a virus is. So if they can't see something like an object or it's not concrete. So if it's not real, then it's just like make believe and it doesn't make sense to them. So thinking about this virus, lots of children will have imagined what it looks like, because if it doesn't look like anything, it's not real. So that can cause a lot of confusion for children, and that's one of the things that probably happened in those first few weeks. Lots of kids were really confused about why they weren't going to school, why they weren't seeing their friends, what's this virus. It doesn't make sense to them, and the languages that we use as adults to explain coronavirus don't make sense to children.
No.
But now I think most children have adapted and they're in a bit of a new normal. So I think what they're experiencing now is more things to do with, so you might still see lots of big emotion, but it's more likely to be with kind of trying not to do schoolwork or being really unmotivated. They don't want to do it. And just withdrawing a bit from activity. So it's kind of like a low level anxiety.
Mentally and physically then, just kind of being a little bit more withdrawn, would you say, and kind of not really that motivational desire to want to do anything schoolwork wise or physical activity as well. I think that's having
I think so. I think physical activity might be a bit different, but I think with schoolwork, home is not school, and I think that's the hardest thing at the moment for parents and for children. For some children, school is a really positive thing for them and they enjoy learning. So then having to do that at home would have been very, very different, and those are the children that probably really missed school and their teachers. because they've got a real big sense of loss. But other children, especially those where school is a bit difficult for them and they struggle a bit academically, they might have been really relieved that they don't have to go to school.
Yes.
It's a bit like being on holiday. But then obviously most schools are still open. So although the doors are closed, the teachers are still working, and most schools are offering children work. And for those children where work is tricky, having mum and dad have to do that with you is really difficult, because home is their haven. Home is their safe space where they get to play and not have to do all these things that to them may be really challenging. And suddenly all those challenging things are in their safe place. And that can make it really difficult for some children and for parents, because parents are not teachers. You're not supposed to be teaching your child the same way as a teacher. It's impossible. So with school, one of the things that I found quite useful talking to teachers about was the fact that classrooms are not quiet. So the expectation that children are going to sit.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
Yeah, so that expectation, and I think most parents do, you know, like you set some work and you think, right, off you go. That's not how it works. Like teachers are talking all the time. Children do group work together. Children are speaking and raising their hands up and, you know, shouting like questions.
Classroom, yes, that's just or a natural environment really to learn in, and being outside as well with the children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And loads of the learning happens outdoors. So I know like loads of primary schools do loads of reading time outside, and they do loads of like the science stuff. They do it outside and they do experiments. So being able to access those kind of resources and tools and having outdoor space to do it is really kind of restricted at the moment. And children are kind of expected to do most of their learning in one space at home.
I think that's
which is really natural.
That's one of the key things that we're concerned about and obviously talking about, is the fact that, you know, the children have really been confined in such a small space and not really had that opportunity to get outside and play and, you know, kind of be active as they obviously are used to. And I think we're concerned as an organisation about the kind of the knock-on effect of that really, and how children are going to then be able to transition back into schools and that environment and the effects this kind of lockdown is going to have on the children. Do you have any kind of thoughts on kind of how the transition period is going to affect the children, and how, you know, maybe we can help as a company to try and integrate them back in to the school environment when that hopefully does come about?
I think preparing children, I don't know how much time we're going to have to prepare our children to go back. One of the things with preparation, so a few, you know, I think a few things off the top of my head. So one of them is about, we've been communicating to our children that being outside is not safe and seeing other people is not safe, in whichever language you've been using, your words you've been using. Most families will be saying, you know, we're staying at home because it's safe here and we don't want to catch the coronavirus. So all those things will be playing on children's minds when we open up the doors and say, no, you're off to school with all your friends. So as well as thinking, yay, I get to see my friends, lots of the older children will be thinking, yeah, but is this safe?
Exactly.
And I think that's also happening to us, right? As adults, we're going, is it okay? Exactly. I mean, and I think lots of parents are also quite concerned about their children going back to school, as much as we want them to be like in that environment and have, you know, our space as well. It's been a really tough time for families, I think, juggling work and schoolwork and everything. I think that transition is going to be really tricky for everybody with anxiety. So a couple of things that might help children is now spending time outdoors as much as you can. So I know it's only about an hour a day, but you can, and we're allowed to exercise still. So it is about trying to do some exercise and do some outdoor activities. So connecting with nature is really helpful to children.
Yeah, you know, you speak about this kind of nature and nurture. Activity, really. Can you give a little bit more of an insight in what that involves? Yeah,
so children learn so much from being with nature, because one of the things that really helps learning is using the 5 senses. So the more you activate sensory experience, the better children learn, because then they're not just learning through one method. They've got other bits of their senses that are being activated, and it really helps them kind of digest information and be curious and creative. And there's loads of research about kind of sensory experiences being really helpful for learning, which is why teachers do lots of practical things that make, you know, they make children do things.
Yeah.
So you can do this at home indoors with things like baking and messy play and creating like sensory boxes and experiences, and just using everyday stuff, especially for younger children to play with. So you can use it in play. And then outdoors, it's about connecting with nature. So, and they're learning all the time. So it could just be, you know, even going on a walk, you can spend some time looking at flowers, and then you can use that as, you know, doing some research on what are these flowers' names and when do they flower and what do they do. So it can be learning. So they're reading, they're researching, they're creating like ideas. And then in terms of like, so there's loads of those things you can do, you know, listening to the birds, trying to figure out what bird songs they are. And that also really helps with anxiety.
Yes.
So if your child is feeling quite anxious, nature is really calming. Because it's grounding, because nature is always there, but it changes all the time. Yeah. So when you're feeling like most of us are in lockdown, like time has stopped, it's really important to connect with nature and realize actually, you know, suddenly there's different flowers that have appeared and there's different bird songs, and you can see, you know, the trees have got lusher and greener. And if you connect with that, then you realize time is passing, but in a positive way rather than we're frozen in space and time.
Yeah.
And then in terms of physical stuff, physical and movement, like exercise and movement, are so important for primary school kids. It releases really like endorphins, and that really helps to overcome some of the chemicals and hormones that come out during anxiety, but particularly cortisol, which makes our bodies just calm down. So when we move and we enjoy it, it really helps with kind of anxiety, the physical part of anxiety, which is what most parents will have seen with younger children, is that they're kind of becoming quite boisterous and quite loud, or, you know, getting quite angry and agitated.
So difficult, isn't it? Yeah, for children that are so used to being active, as we said earlier, it's so almost to have them caged up, really. They need that release to find out why they need that. Obviously, yeah, we do a lot with the physical activity type of equipment that we install, but it's to understand the reason behind it and the philosophies. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so things like, it really helps them problem solve to do things outdoors. So things like, even, you know, just running. If you're running somewhere and you might have to find like the path, the most comfortable path to run in. Yeah. That might seem really simple, but actually you're helping children's brains like think about problem solving. Obviously most of the parks are closed at the moment, so lots of those leisure activities like the equipment stuff is off limits to children, but there are still things you can do. You can do like hopping, you know, like develop some hopscotch, or, you know, that kind of stuff where children have to think about where they place their feet. So that develops agility and balance, but also it's helping their brain kind of problem solve, like, where do I put my foot next to make this faster, or not to fall off, and that kind of thing. And the thing with doing physical exercise with kids, which most people talk about well-being and mental health, and because there's so much research on it, but I know most people know about that. But for me, one of the key things that I think is really important with children is that it builds their confidence. And I think that's something that most people don't really think about. But when your child is doing exercise and agility, and like I was saying, like movements, so it could be skipping, hopping, running, climbing up a tree or a log, or, you know, walking on a log and trying to get some balance, they're building physical skills, and that develops confidence in their bodies. And building up on confidence, building up on the feeling of strength, both physical strength, but also like in they're kind of confidently strong. So thinking, I can try something that's a little bit scary because this log is wobbly and I might fall off, but I can do it and I enjoy it. That then generalizes to other aspects of their life, particularly at school. So then it gives them confidence to try new things. It helps them kind of problem solve other other topics and ideas, even if they're not physical ideas. And for children who don't like exercise, because some children don't, and they'll think it's a chore and I don't feel it's usually to do with confidence. It's usually children who don't feel very confident about their bodies, who don't feel that they can do it as well as others.
I totally understand. Yeah, that we see that a lot with regard to our play equipment in particular. And we do kind of cater for the children that are less confident to almost get them to engage with the equipment rather than put it too challenging too quickly, making sure that it's accessible for everybody.
Yes.
And with regard to that, obviously it's that sense of achievement really. Once the child accomplishes something, that no matter what level, once they've got that sense of achievement, then encourage that confidence, like you said, to kind of get them to engage more and go to that next level, and you can see them kind of grow as a person almost once they've achieved it really.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do that now. You don't, like, obviously when you've got the play equipment, it's so much better, but in lockdown you can still try and do that with your child.
It's important really for the children.
Yeah, and one of the best ways to do that is to model it yourself. So if you find a log, go and climb it.
Yes.
Like, it's, you know, if as a parent you just encourage your child to do these things but you don't do them with them, they're not going to, like, they're less likely to do it unless it's like in their nature and they're running off jumping on a log. Then, you know, let them run with it. But otherwise it's about you doing it and having fun with it and being really playful, and that can be really encouraging to your child.